Hello, and welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you here to today's Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor, and let me just turn the chat on so everyone can let us know where they're zooming in from. I am so excited to welcome today's guest, author, cartoonist, illustrator, artist, Amy Kurzweil. She is the author of a new graphic memoir called Artificial: A Love Story. You might already know Amy as a contributing cartoonist to Alta. She's been on Alta Live before. It's a relatively small group, so you can 3 times, I guess, you go in our Hall of Fame. Quickly, some introductions. Alta Live is a 30-minute digital interview and discussion series held Wednesdays at 12:30 Pacific. We take stories, contributors, and subjects from the magazine and website and expand upon them here with you. For example, David L. Yulin, Alta's books editor, reviewed Amy's new book, Artificial, for Alta's Monday book review. And so we know Amy well. She draws cartoons for the Altitudes section of the magazine. She's got this amazing new book. We have her here today in the midst of her book tour to kind of talk more about it and get to know her. She, Amy Kurzweil, is a New Yorker cartoonist, educator, and author of Flying Couch, a graphic memoir. She was a 2021 Berlin Prize Fellow with the American Academy in Berlin, a 2019 Schierling Fellow with the Black Mountain Institute, and she has won numerous fellowships. Amy's been nominated for Technophilia, her 4-part series for the Believer magazine. We love Believer magazine. Her writing, comics, and cartoons have been published by The Verge, the New York Times Book Review, Longreads, Literary Hub, Wired, Alta Journal, and many other places. Her new book, the one we're going to talk about today, is Artificial: A Love Story. Before we begin, some housekeeping. Alta is the digital interview series we do here at this beautiful magazine, Alta Journal. If you are unfamiliar with Alta, we are in a quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. You can join us as a member for as little as $3 a month for a digital membership, or get the quarterly magazine, a hat, and a book for $50 a year. This current issue, themed all towards kind of writing, the process of writing, the people who write, also includes a holiday guide, 126 books by Alta contributors. In this, you will find everything on your holiday gift list that you need, books in every category, including illustration and including Amy's book. We highly recommend. David's review recommended it, and she is in our holiday book guide. So check us out. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. Amy and I will chat for 30 minutes. We're going to take a peek at some images from Artificial and then get to as many of your questions as we can. This will be posted to altaonline.com later today. We're going to send you an email with a link to this video where you can buy Amy's book, read David's review, and invites to upcoming events. With that, I welcome Amy. Where are you zooming in from today?
Hey, so great to be here. Thank you so much, Beth. Today I'm zooming in from Brooklyn, where I used to live. Now I'm a Californian officially. But I used to live in Brooklyn, and I'm in the middle of my book tour. And it's so great to be here on Alta Live. I'm a big fan of Alta for many reasons. I love the size it's a big size. I love it. My book is all about kind of materiality, and I just love a big magazine. And I love the cartoons, and David's review is so thoughtful and really moved me. I hope everyone will read it. And it's nice to be back on Alta Live. I remember being on Alta Live a few years ago.
Yeah,
and I have a very vivid memory of zooming in from a closet because it was mid-pandemic, and it was like the era of us doing Zoom calls in closets.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I was in the closet, but I was.
There was a reason. We could go back and revisit. You had a very good reason.
There was a reason
why you were in your closet. We were learning Zoom. It was in the very early.
We were learning. You thought you needed to be in places that you didn't need to be, right? But I set it up
in a shower or whatever. There was some
worked.
Thank you for coming back in a outside of a closet. And joining us. I know that you're in Brooklyn right now doing this book tour, but so I'm grateful that you have taken the time. I wanted to kind of dive in with you. So basically your book is we should point out, it's a graphic memoir. And so it is it's a very kind of fun, enjoyable read that I, kind of want to go back to and revisit because it is deep and rich. It is packed with information. But the gist, the kind of like overall gist, is that you had never met your grandfather, your paternal grandfather, and worked with your father to create a AI version of your grandpa, went by the name Fred. Mm-hmm. To see if you could kind of get to know him. Mm-hmm. Your father is a kind of a famous futurist, inventor, technology guru. He had been saving your grandfather's archives, paperwork, for, I imagine, much of your life. When did you realize what his intentions were with saving all of Fred's, his passport, his paperwork, his application letters?
Mm-hmm. Right, right. It's curious to me. It's one of those things like, when did you learn that the tooth fairy wasn't real? Like, when did, this stuff that's just kind of swirling in your orbit, like, when did I learn that my father really did want to resurrect the identity of his father through these artifacts? I can't pinpoint when I learned that for sure, but I do have a memory of reading about that project in my father's public work and also seeing this documentary about my father, Transcendent Man. And that was actually the first time that I saw the storage unit. Was the camera people had followed my father into the storage unit, which is in my hometown, which I'd vaguely heard about. Do you just hear things about your parents? You're like, okay, whatever, storage unit full of archives. And when I actually saw it in that movie and saw my father holding his father's documents, holding, newspaper clippings and photos, and my grandfather, I should say, was a classical pianist and composer from Vienna, and he fled the Nazis in 1938 and died in 1970. And so in his archives are a lot of bureaucratic documents, some of which come from Europe, but he also had lots of music sheets and lectures and things related to his musical life. So watching my father hold these items, not in real life, but through the artifice of a movie, I think was a very interesting and impactful experience for me. It was sort of like the artistry of that movie made the reality of this project sink in, which I realize sounds a little bit like a paradox, but I think there's something interesting there, that art actually was the vehicle through which I internalized this project as a real project.
It is interesting, especially because so much of, now that you say this, so much of the book is recreating you're drawing actual physical things, portraits, portrait photography, passports, letters. I imagine you've recreated the handwriting on the letters.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of tracing.
Emails, all of it.
It is,
we're seeing it through your eyes.
It's definitely a theme of the book, the idea of what do you gain through recreation, especially through human recreation. What does artifice and the human artifice and the human hand sort of help you gain? How are you learning more about the past when you're engaging with the past through art and through human handicraft? But there's also this question of what you lose, like what kinds of information gets lost when we're recreating, or how do things change when we're recreating? And memory is a form of recreation. And so the process of the book and the form of the book is really a meditation on that. And I just have to shout out David's review for really digging into that idea in a really profound way. The idea of the artifice of memory and the artifice of recreating the past. There's always going to be a shift. There's always going to be a change. And that's something that the book is really engaging with.
Well, and this is not a book about AI. This is not a book about technology, or this is a predictive, this is what's going to happen in the future, we're all going to be able to communicate with the dead. This felt much more to me as a really personal journey that you and your dad went through. And I have a couple of questions. I realized that, the journey you were on was to kind of find a way to connect your dad in many senses with with his father, and then you with the grandfather you had never known. But through it, there's so much about your dad that is kind of eye-opening, especially what the loss of his father when he was so young meant to him. There's a kind of, I felt a lot of Easter eggs throughout the whole thing, but there's the theme of the heart and heart attacks, and your dad's kind of focus on health and his health. But he had lost his dad when he was very young in 1970 and saved all of these archives with this ultimate goal. And here you are kind of connecting with your father in this, deeply profound way. I wonder, is this book kind of your version of your dad's collection of his father's memorabilia?
Yeah, like, is this book a way to connect to my father and collect things about my father? I mean, that's such a nice insight that you're offering. I think that's true. I realized that early on that this project was a way to spend time with my father. Like, my father and I, and this is a theme that comes up in the book, we've often connected to each other through our work, because that's a legacy that we've inherited from his parents and from the sort of Viennese Jews who were very ambitious and, had to be very enterprising in order to escape the Holocaust. So that's something that I'm sort of dealing with in the book, is this like legacy of grand ambition and maybe trying to figure out where that comes from. And I do think it comes from kind of the intense pressure of that history and of that necessity. Because my grandfather's story is, he was saved by this woman who chose to sponsor him because she was moved by his music. And so the legacy there is like, okay, you have to be really ambitious and talented in order to survive hardship in life. And so I think that that's a theme that comes up in the book, and the idea that my father and I are very focused on our artistic ambitions, and balancing artistic ambition and human relationships is a challenge in life. And then one of the ways that we kind of triangulate between that challenge is to work on creative projects together. And I think probably a lot of people can relate to that, either with their family or their friends. Like, you find these ways to meet people through your shared interests and your shared ambitions.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it did. At first, it was more just like, okay, I'm going to just spend time with my father through this project. But then I think you're right. By the end of it, it does feel like, in working on the book, in order to contextualize my relationship with my grandfather and what was even happening with the technology in the book, I needed to communicate a lot about my father and a lot about my father's past projects and like who he is and the kinds of technologies he's worked on. And I ended up with this really long appendix at the back of the book. I don't know if anyone's read it, but my dad was like, tell people they need to read the appendix. There's a lot of good stuff in there. He's like, they're not going to get it if they don't read the appendix. I'm like, Dad, I think they'll get it. But like, there is a lot of there are these archives of information within the book where you can actually learn more about my father, about me, about this history. And it does feel like at the end of it, I just jam-packed it with a kind of archive of my father's life. Even more so maybe than my grandfather's life in the end, because one of the things I come to discover in weeding through my grandfather's archives is like, even though we have so much information saved, there are still a lot of things that are missing, yeah.
I want to get to kind of how that manifests with the chatbot, but can we look at a little bit of work? I just picked 5 of kind of favorite pages. And I'm curious, I can just kind of click through these quickly because we have a short time. And I want people to buy the book. But can you talk a little bit? This struck me. There's a lot of, as we mentioned earlier, you're taking what I imagine are actual photographs, and drawing them in adding your own style to them. Certainly. I mean, you've been an artist for a very long time. What's that process like for you?
It's so interesting. So much of the book is recreating images, recreating photographs, recreating this. What you see behind the photographs here is the passport that my grandfather used to escape Vienna. So he had this limited passport, and on several other pages, you see the open passport and you see it stamped with that J, which is a pretty interesting historical document that Jews escaping Vienna had their passports stamped with this J. But I spent a lot of time in this process of partly tracing, partly close looking. Tracing really only gets you so far, as it turns out. So this process, I can get in, I don't want to get into the weeds because we don't have too much time, but like, basically I spent so much time with these documents, and a kind of time and a kind of attention that is pretty rare in life. And especially rare when it comes to the world of technology, that we don't actually have the quality of attention that we used to when we're in the digital world. There's like so much asking for our attention. And part of the process of the book for me was in kind of refusing to succumb to that kind of attention of the digital world and assert this more loving, more human, slowed down quality of attention. And recreating the artifacts is one of the ways that I was asserting that slower quality of attention. And so it's like I just saw so many interesting things in these documents the more time I spent with them. In the passport, there's so many interesting stamps on his passport that really
Oh, I'm sure.
that tell the story of how he escaped.
I thought it was also interesting that we see the storage unit where your dad kept everything about his father, and then here are your father's archives. And I also there's so many different kinds of art in this memoir.
Mm-hmm.
From, you have really kind of like classical watercolory images of your grandfather playing music to these, which are to me much more reminiscent of, the cartoon work that I've seen. You recreate texts. Now, first of all, I just want to clarify, these are your real texts?
Okay. Well, this part is very interesting. There are scenes in the book where I present different incarnations of the chatbot, some of which are as real as possible, exactly what was in front of me when I was communicating with the chatbot. Some are more imagined, and this scene is a more imagined scene of a imagined design of how I could interact with the chatbot. This is not exactly, I didn't text the chatbot on my phone, but these lines that come back to me in this imagined scene are lines that do come from my grandfather's archive. So that's what I'm like going back to, that sort of the versions of artifice that are in the book. There's like a lot of kind of me asserting my own recreation, but the through line is like all of the words do come from my grandfather.
It's also, I mean, you have so many emails. You and your father have worked together on so many projects. That these are all kind of your artifacts or your father's artifacts. But there's a lot in here because this is a love story. There's a lot about your then partner, current husband. And first of all, how did he feel about being included in this? Was Jacob down with this?
Jacob. So the subtitle of the book is a love story. So there is a classic love story. There are many love stories in the book, but one of the classic ones is my partner, Jacob. Jacob loves it. He's like, you made me look so kind. And I'm like, you are, you are kind. He's if you read the book, you will get to know him, so it will not surprise you that he's just so open and so game for this kind of thing. He's very unself-conscious. He's very calm. He's very kind. And he was into it. And, he watched the process. This took me 7 years. We've been in a relationship for many years, kind of in different incarnations of relationships. And he would see the pages unfold. Like,
I have him at the end. Yeah, here. This is Jacob.
Yeah, here's Jacob. First the sketches, then the final images. This is us moving across the country.
And while debating the meaning of life.
Yeah, of course.
Or whether or not that's even a worthy question to answer. I wanted to end on this because this is, I don't want to I feel like, are there spoilers in this book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there are spoilers in this book because it's not quite a linear book. I think that the linear plot might move you forward through it, but I don't think it matters if you know where it goes. Yeah.
But just in terms of, you had, this can kind of like lead me to our other questions. You started this book, as you mentioned, 7 years ago, or you worked on this for 7 years. And I imagine in your family, technology, artificial intelligence has been a topic for decades, whereas for many of us, it's relatively new, if not brand new. And the technology has probably changed in the 20 minutes since we've been talking, much less in the past 7-10 years. So I'm curious what can you just briefly kind of tell us and again, I don't want to get into the weeds, what that process was like creating the dad bot that you were creating of Fred for this project. And then how you, part two kind of the question, how you imagine the book might be different or the result might be different in 2023.
Right. Right. So, I mean, what challenge of a book like this, you said it's not a book about AI, but it is about like one specific use case of AI, you know? And my role in building this chatbot was mostly an analog role. I was playing the role of spending time in the archives, finding examples of my grandfather's writing, transcribing, decoding his handwriting. There's a whole subplot about that. Transcribing. And, you know, I wasn't the only person doing that, but I played a very big role in doing that. And then creating this body of text, which was then married with a different algorithm that I didn't build, that my father was involved in building, and a team of people that my father was working with was involved in building. And so there was the natural language understanding algorithm, which had different use cases. And then there was the body of text that I helped digitize. And those two things were married to create a selective chatbot. And so a selective chatbot is one in which you query the chatbot, you ask a question, and it finds an answer in the archive. So it's using language that's already been said in a different context, but selecting it as an answer to new questions. And that at the time felt very sci-fi and very like, oh, this algorithm understands language. It's kind of like resurrecting the voice of this person. But today it doesn't sound sci-fi at all. Today it sounds like a very sensible use of an algorithm helping you navigate an archive, right? And so much of the book was in coming to a new understanding. I say I sort of disenchanted myself with the AI. I came to a really new understanding about what this technology meant and what it is and what it could be used for. And it ended up feeling like the creative space of writing and drawing was still enchanted for me. It was like my imagination of my grandfather was actually the thing that was like still sort of sparkling and mystical. And the AI ended up feeling like less of that. And so today's technology, chatbots are more generative. I mean, we still use selective chatbots. So a generative chatbot would be one that's creating new language like ChatGPT. And so I do think a really interesting question they don't have the answer to is, what is the version of my grandfather's AI chatbot that is generative, that really creates new language? What is the status of that? What is that? How is that connected to him? How would that be reflecting his voice? Would it be reflecting his voice in a meaningful way, or would it just be some new thing that's creating new language? And those are the questions that I still have about these chatbots. And I do think that these are going to be a part of the future. So I hope that my book can be this way that people start to think about the status of these things and come up with answers for themselves about how they want to relate to them.
Well, and it's also so interesting that the chatbot that you created is based off of the archives that were available to your father when your grandfather died in 1970. And at one point, you know, it's you mentioned that everything sounded so formal, and it was because he applied for so many jobs. He was always looking for a new job. Yeah. And so it's, you know, you don't necessarily, and he was very quiet in person anyway. And so kind of the access you have is only what the kind of foot paper trail he left during his life. And then now we have your father's, you know, digital trail, his paper trail, and now yours in this book.
We're especially digitally loquacious. Me and my father were big emailers and texters, and my father keeps all these journals. And you know, yeah, it's like the amount of information that we're creating about ourselves and our lives has just become explosive. And so the open question is like, what does that mean for the future of memory?
It's like David's review said, there's a lot of open questions here. You are very comfortable asking the big questions and just letting us sit in the discomfort of having to see if we can answer them.
Yeah, why not? Got to do it.
At one point in the book, you visit a psychic, which had me kind of thinking, I don't know what your belief system is, but in terms of if there is an afterlife, if the concept of using AI to connect with someone who has passed away, to continue having a conversation with them, or continue a relationship with someone who has passed away, I wonder kind of what that does to not only the concept of how they're will it let them rest in peace, um,
Mhm.
as if you believe in that, and what it does to the very human concept of grief.
Mhm.
And how has this helped your, I know that your dad has, struggled with the loss of his father so young. Has this helped his grieving process at all,
Mhm.
alleviated it in any way?
I think it's an active project makes any sort of active engagement with memory is helpful for grief, I think. I mean, I can't speak to my father's grief. Like his father's been gone for so long. But I think all along it's been very helpful to feel like there is something he's guarding. And there's something that he's engaged with and he has something to tend to. And a lot of our grief rituals, I mean, I think in the secular world, we've lost access to a lot of grief rituals. I mean, I'll just say, like, I was raised somewhat secular. I'm Jewish in my culture, and I grew up with my father's ideas, and like my sense of the spiritual world is very open to, to be determined. Like I'm not someone who subscribes to like a really clear belief system in this way, but I'm very curious. And it seems to me like a lot of our grief rituals and religious traditions are about this kind of like having something to do, having something to tend to, having like a place where you put stones on the gravesite, or and marking the rituals in a way to keep memory alive. Like we do have that as a colloquial term in our language. Like it's very disorienting that we have memories of somebody and they're so active in our minds, and then that person leaves our life, and like we're just supposed to accept this reality in which this person, where we have all these memories of them, like are no longer relevant to our daily life. That doesn't seem like sensible to me. And I think the way most of us live with loss and grief is that we find a way to take the memory of people and make them grounded in the real world. And so I think there's some potential for AI chatbots to like play a role. There's a lot of concern about like, oh, will people be duped into thinking that the person's no longer, or that the person's still alive, or that they're not actually dead? Like I think that's where people often go when they think about these things. There's that famous Black Mirror episode called Be Right Back, which is like one of the great episodes of Black Mirror. I think it's from the first or second season. And it's like this woman starts off with an AI chatbot of her husband who dies tragically. And then she like ends up with building him into an animated human Frankenstein form. And like it all goes downhill the way Black Mirror episodes do. But I think that's kind of where people go. Like we're denying the loss. But I don't actually think that that's the reality of this kind of technology and this kind of process. Like, I think people can understand that somebody is in a new space in their life when they pass away, and that, but we still need ways to engage with their memory. And this is, I think, one of them.
How do you feel about AI in art as an artist? Are you excited, concerned?
Well, I try to be optimistic about these things as like a matter of choice. I think that the what I'm excited about with AI is the potential for it to help us sort of navigate archives, for it to like help us approach information with some guidance, and like as sort of a tool, something that we can collaborate with. But I'm less excited about AI creating images for me, because I'm an artist who likes to use my hands, and I like to be the creative force. And so I think there's a lot of anxiety in that direction of, AI actually doing the jobs for us that we are here to want to do. I hope that we can, like, the forces that maybe want AI to replace human labor, I hope that the paradigm can shift to be more of a collaborative model. And I hope that like the legal systems and the sort of political systems can recognize that and support artists to be continuing to do their jobs and like share their human creativity. And that doesn't mean we need to say like AI is evil, get out of here, but we can collaborate and think about things as a more collaborative model.
I want to dive in while we still have time to some questions from the audience.
Mhm.
Janine, thank you. Your book is a fabulous feast for all senses. Asks, does artificial ultimately become an evolutionary evolved species category?
Wow, I love those words. I don't know what they mean.
I was like, we need Ray here for this.
Does artificial, can you repeat the question?
Does artificial, I think she means artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay, there we go. So
ultimately become an evolutionary evolved species category.
There we go. I understand the question now. Well, I think something really interesting about AI is that it is very different than human intelligence. And it does give us an experience of encountering intelligence that's not human, and that might help us appreciate other kinds of intelligence that are not human. For example, alien intelligence, which we haven't encountered yet, but maybe we will one day.
Or have we?
Or animal intelligence, or the intelligence of trees, the intelligence of large systems. So I think that AI is a real opportunity for us to think about encountering other kinds of intelligences. I'm not sure if that's speaking to the sort of prediction that maybe AI is the next paradigm of evolution. I think that's one hypothesis, that like we could, but that involves sort of merging our intelligence with artificial intelligence. And that's my father's vision, is that like our minds will extend, and we will get these like new level of the neocortex to start, having more advanced thoughts. I think that's a plausible theory, but you got to read his books to to get into that.
I mean, I feel like I learned so much about Ray in this book. It's just, how does he feel about it?
He loves it.
To your dad.
But he's like, he's my dad. He loves everything I do. He's a guy, so he's a big fan. If you ask him, he'll say it's the best graphic memoir I've ever read. And then you're like, Dad, what other graphic memoirs have you read? And he's like, So, yeah.
I think, was it your dad that had the line that life is like a block and we just keep walking the same block? We repeat the same block over and over again. You've done a graphic memoir about the women in your family, and now one about the men. What's your next project? Will we get to follow Ethan, your brother, on a journey?
Maybe. Yeah, I got to get him in there somewhere.
You could do a whole series. I mean, you could just, make a whole series.
I think the next project I'm going to work on will probably be fiction, but informed by life experience and my family and all of these themes that I've been thinking about forever. But I think I'm going to try my hand at fiction.
Will you keep drawing gag cartoons?
Absolutely. I got to get on submitting.
Good. With that, Amy, I am so grateful that you took the time. I know you've got an event in a couple of hours, another event for your book. Folks, we are going to send you a link where you can buy Artificial, where you can read Alta Online, David's wonderful review of Amy's new book, a recording of this video, so you can share it with everyone you know. And check out Alta and our holiday book guide. Next week, we are closed for the Thanksgiving holiday. We are grateful for all of you for coming, and especially thank you, Amy, for taking the time with us today and for this beautiful book.
Thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.